Welcome to Bloom Today. We have an eye-opening show for you. We're going to be talking about the trauma that broke the camel's back.
Hi, I'm Paula Wallace, president of Bloom in the Dark, and this is
Ginny Paula, the single-handed serenity coach. Welcome to Bloom Today, where we talk about internal and external brokenness and how you can heal,
so that you can use the fertilizer of your past to bloom today. Hey everyone, we're excited to have you here today where we're talking about the trauma that broke the camel's back. Well, kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back, except on our show we talk about trauma. So.
Only the light things for us.
Yes.
Have you ever had that moment where you just couldn't take it anymore and everything just kind of went on explosion?
Yeah, so thinking through the different opportunities I've had to kind of go into a psychotic mode, there were so many to choose from that it was difficult, actually, not because I didn't have any time where I severely overreacted to a situation, but the fact that that happened repeatedly in my life. And it's only been recently that I've truly understood why it was that way.
The explosions?
The explosions, my reaction to a trauma. Because a trauma is bad all by itself, doesn't matter what trauma it is.
Absolutely.
But when you react on the inside in a way that is totally disproportionate to the actual
to what's actually
seeming
happening
situation, that's a whole different story. Like the time somebody referred to me as an apple. Did I tell you about that?
Your new nickname is Macintosh.
I'm a Macintosh, not a computer. Wait, that's an apple. Anyhow, I think they actually meant the fruit, and it was a guy that I thought, honestly, I was going to marry. I was thousands of miles away from where I grew up.
And he referred to you as an apple?
Yes, and the funny thing is, you know how everyone says, if I was just skinnier, then I'd be loved or I'd be whatever? Well, the funny thing about this is I was like super skinny and really fit. And I'm finally here, can pursue a relationship thousands of miles away from where I was. And he says, oh, by the way, when you can't have an apple, it's like the most amazing thing in the world. But when somebody puts an apple in your hand, it's just an apple. And so since I was suddenly available and there,
sorry, that's really...
Isn't that horrible?
Couldn't think of a better analogy.
Right. So that was a breakup.
I'm sorry.
It was hurtful.
That's unnecessarily.
It is funny after the fact. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, that's a dear Jane letter in this case, right?
But the way it hit me at that time was devastating. Not just this is the guy I thought I was going to marry. This is a relationship that I've had in my head as the end all for several years now, and it's finally a real let's move forward with it time frame. But it put me into a tailspin that sent me into a full-scale food addiction. So I suddenly had an umbilical cord attached to the refrigerator. It wasn't just I'm eating a little too much emotionally because I'm struggling or something. No, I gained 72 pounds in 6 months. So that gives you an idea that this kind of hits.
To fill that hole that he had left. But I mean, I've gone through breakups, and I've gone through a breakup where I thought I was going to marry someone. I was living with them, but I didn't gain 72 pounds.
You didn't?
Thank goodness. It did start me on the path to being an alcoholic.
Oh, there you go.
But in my history, I had lots of cycles of explosions because I stuffed all of my emotions. And instead of feeling them or feeling like I could ever express them, so I tried to stuff them so I could be the good little girl and be helpful for people instead of expressing that I had a different opinion or expressing that I had different needs or I didn't like something that was happening. I just kind of stuffed it. Well, guess what? It can only stuff so much until there's some kind of explosion that happens, and I would unload onto somebody, and it would be loud, and it would be nasty, and there'd be a lot of doors slamming, and more passive-aggressive than aggressive until it got really aggressive. So it was just a cycle that continued. But for me also, it went even further because that all kind of compounded those years and years of stuffing. And then when I did get a DUI after all of those years of drinking, and I finally got that DUI, my entire identity crumbled. And I had friends or people, acquaintances in my life that would say, oh, well, I had a DUI, but it just means that you stopped drinking or you just stopped drinking and driving.
Take a class, right?
We do have to take a class here in Tennessee and learn about alcohol and our relationship to it and all of that. But, a lot of people would say, well, you just kind of move on. Like, it's something that happened, but you move on. For me, I felt like my whole life was destroyed. And people were having a hard time understanding why I just could not get over it or get over the shame of the situation. And it wasn't necessarily just because of the DUI, but because of all of these other things that had come to this point of stuffing to try to be good enough, try to be good enough, try to be good enough, try to be good enough. And then when that last thing happens where I'm really not good enough, then it all hits me in a way where all of that not good enough all along the line just kind of compounded in that moment. The trauma that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, it's devastating when that happens. And what's incredible is when you start realizing that my reaction with the food addiction to that situation wasn't just about that situation.
Right.
Yeah, my heart was broken, but it was actually about all of the trauma and brokenness I had before. Compounded with the rejection and the fact that I'm thousands of miles away from family or friends, the fact that, I have no idea who I am or what I'm doing now because I had thought one direction and that was all changed. But at the end of the day, my resiliency, recovery, my processing wasn't healthy normal because I wasn't healthy normal when that situation happened.
Right.
And that's a piece of what we're talking today is recognizing that anytime you have an extreme reaction to a situation. In some cases with high trauma, that includes PTSD. An event will start triggering PTSD. Right. But that usually ties back to childhood trauma or brokenness, where a healthy person having that same trauma as an adult wouldn't necessarily get PTSD.
Exactly.
From that. So whether it's war or it's just a broken heart or it's
a car crash,
a home invasion where your stuff gets stolen, or just so many different things that I've run into people like us who have had a severe reaction to a place of brokenness that is bad enough on its own.
Right.
They're all devastating. But where the spiral that can throw us into is even worse.
Exactly.
Than that.
That overreaction is a really big red flag for any of us when we are overreacting to something, and the trigger is much smaller than our reaction. That's a huge red flag that there's something else, there's something deeper, there's something that's happened earlier on that we are feeling at the same time and that we still have not been able to process or heal through.
So for awareness sake, we have a few things that are so helpful both to the victim. Like in my case, having been a childhood victim of all different types of abuse, it's understanding that the victim needs more compassion, needs more support, needs an extra hand, and that for
you could
give them you if you were there, you weren't there.
What if I could?
Yeah.
This is my way, though, by educating. And churches as well, and counselors and people who are, counselors are trained in this area, and they know better than anyone, coaches, but just a friend. If you're just a friend to someone who seems to be overreacting, a lot of times we feel like, whoa, I don't want to be any part of this overreaction. They're so dramatic. What's wrong with them? Well, guess what? There's actually probably something bigger wrong here that... And that's why in Galatians 6:9 it says, let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. And in a lot of my coaching clients, I see a lot of the same things where they benefit from my just receiving how they're reacting and walking through them and accepting them for what they're feeling. And I'm able to not take their reactions personally because I understand that there's deeper hurt that they're still possibly carrying.
Right, and usually when we're the ones severely overreacting, we think we're crazy. We're getting other people telling us that we're crazy.
Yeah.
And the fact is, when there is that compassion and support that gives us the opportunity to go, okay, kind of every trauma triggers an opportunity to heal. I like saying that.
Yes, it is.
Because it's a warning system that tells you that there's something more, there's a bigger problem, there's a deeper issue, and you can use that opportunity to get help, not just for the current trauma or issue, but actually ask for help in working through previous damage, previous hurt, unresolved issues, where we're recognizing that until something is processed and healed, it is going to make anything worse.
Right. It's like we're walking around with an open wound on our heart, and when something happens, another trauma happens, you're not just like poking somebody with a stick. You're poking the open wound. You're rubbing salt in that. So you're feeling that first wound at the same time that you're also feeling
a whole lot of others.
This new wound, and it's just consistently unable to heal. And so you never get to the point where you are going to be able to have the appropriate reaction or the same kind of level of reaction until you've been able to heal first.
Right, and with PTSD, you can actually be reverting to a childhood trauma mindset or behavior pattern or capacity. So for me, an adult trauma trigger would send me to 5 years old, for instance, and then I'm reacting to this situation like a 5-year-old, and somebody else can just be looking like, why is she acting like a child? Well, I was acting like a child because I was actually in a trauma trigger PTSD state to trauma that was done to me when I was 5, because this situation triggered it. And when people started recognizing, wait a second, this is really a problem, then they started helping me work through the 5-year-old trauma in addition to this whatever current thing that was triggering and making that worse, which was hugely helpful for me to actually be able to grow up past that trauma and heal from it.
I'm really thankful that you have done that.
This show wouldn't work very well if I hadn't done it.
If I accidentally triggered you and you turned into a 5-year-old, it would be crazy. But God is so good that
He's a healer.
that He has actually brought that to you and brought you forward through the next. But you got professional help.
I did get professional help, and that is where the people around you can support you and help you. To start out with, for years, I thought counseling was bad. I thought that getting help meant failure. I didn't realize that the healthy thing to do when you're dealing with brokenness and a broken past and a broken situation or a trauma is to get help.
Yeah,
That's
to reach out.
If you're broken physically, if you have a broken arm, people would think you're stupid if you don't go to the doctor and get it set and wear a cast, right?
Right.
But emotionally, we many times judge people who have the emotional broken arm if they want to go get help, when we should be encouraging to get help through a pastor, a Celebrate Recovery or recovery program.
Sure. Support groups, anonymous programs.
A psychiatrist.
Coaches,
whatever.
Whatever it is that you may need. And each one of us is going to be at a different place. And each one of us might need something a little bit different, or we might need a counselor and a coach.
Or in my case, all of the above. Over 10 years of healing, it has kind of been a whole series, from medication to spiritual intervention to counseling, coaches, recovery program, support groups. God has used all of the above to help with healing and support and encouragement and accountability and whatever the pieces were. So we can all do something about it, and we can all help each other.
And we really do. If we can recognize the fact that we're not just these people who are, I don't want to deal with this person because they're too much for me. And we can just meet them where they're at and show them God's love in that place.
Where 2 Corinthians 1:5 says, "For just as we share abundantly in the sufferings of Christ, so also our comfort abounds through Christ." This is a hopeful place. So every time I realize that there's a trauma trigger, I say it's an opportunity to heal. I get to run to God. I get to go do something about it.
Leveling up to the next
piece with
of healing.
new things, new digging, sometimes processing hurt from the past at a new level.
Right.
But with ultimately more joy, more healing, more abundance, more comfort. It's so worth it.
Absolutely.
We have coaching
We do. If you want to dig into this topic a little bit more, you can go to our website, bloomtodaytv.com, and we have a coaching tool there, which is